Hello everyone, this is Daniel and welcome back to another video. Today we'll be talking about ellipses in drawing because ellipses are actually very important when you think about them, because in drawing we usually like to make things up from our mind. We draw things that we've never seen before, or maybe we want to design objects just in a different way. Or sometimes you might want to draw an object from a different angle or perspective. In all those cases, what we usually do to draw the object accurately and consistently is to construct them from simple objects such as cubes, cylinders, or spheres. In this context, the ellipse is a very useful tool that you will use often for both spheres and cylinders. Even if it's just a part of your object, the ellipse will come up very often, and being able to draw the ellipse accurately is crucial in that sense. So here, to start off with a definition of what an ellipse is, we have a few ellipses. You can see it is basically what a rectangle would be to a square. So if we had a circle, the ellipse is the squished version, if you want to say. The most important distinguishing feature, however, is that the ellipse, which has a major axis, which is the long one going through here, and the minor axis, which is the shorter one, are also symmetry axes to the ellipse. The ellipse is exactly the same on all of these four sides. Even if you put the ellipse into perspective, such as here, where, for example, the closer side of the ellipse would seem bigger because it's closer, of course, it still continues to be in this elliptical shape that is mirrored along all four axes. There's no distortion happening. The only thing that happens in perspective is that the center shifts more towards the viewer. But we'll look at this in more detail. So as you can see, my point that I want to make here in the very beginning is that an ellipse has a very simple construction. However, it is easy for artists to make mistakes and to draw it approximated but slightly differently and inaccurately. So we want to quickly look at how to construct it properly and how to make use of it in these simple objects such as a cylinder or a sphere, and we'll get to that in a second. So let us get started with a new layer here. So the best way to construct an ellipse is from a square, basically, but I don't really mean a square as in this shape with all lengths being the same, because we really want to put this square into perspective in order to make it an ellipse. If I draw just this square and I do the construction, we'll get a circle. So I want to demonstrate this first. Now, let's say we have a square here. I'll make it a bit bigger so that you can see it properly. First thing is I want to find the middle of all of these sides. One way to do that very easily is to find the diagonals that will intersect at some point. And from this intersection, we'll draw at an angle that is in between of this line and this line. In this case, they're parallel, so I'll just draw a parallel line. I'll draw through the center point, and this gives me a very accurate middle for all of these sides. The reason why I want to do this is because the circle in this case, or the ellipse, will have to intersect at these 4 points where the square meets where the center of the sides of the square is. And so now if I draw my circle through these points, we get something like this here. So my hand is a bit shaky, but you get my point. You draw through these 4 points and you get something that's pretty accurately what a circle would be. Now what happens if I was to transform this into perspective? And I can really just go ahead and use the transformation tools here, actually, to demonstrate what happens. And you can see that we get a new shape that we can still perceive as a square, but really it is in perspective now. And in perspective, we get lots of distortion. Everything that's further in the back is getting smaller, everything that's more in the front is bigger. But how can we now draw this ellipse properly? Because now it's not a circle anymore, we consider it an ellipse. So let's try to draw this from sketch. I assume that you know how to draw a square in perspective. Basically, we have a horizon, you have your perspective lines, and this could be your square now. But I'll guess these shapes without construction now, just for demonstration's sake. We could have, for example, something along the lines of this as our square in perspective. Now I'll do the same construction as before. I'll connect the diagonals. I'll get my center. I'll go through the center and find the middle of my sides. Just roughly, that should be good enough. I will mark my sides, the point through which my ellipse has to go, and then I'll do the same thing. Connect these points with a curve that is very even like this. One thing that you can take note of is that the ellipse at the point where it goes through the side has the same angle as the side. So you see how at this point the angle is like this, right here. Here the angle is like it's parallel to the side at this point. So this helps a little bit to get the angle and like how sharp the corners are a bit, right? Maybe I'm not sharp enough on this edge, for example. So you can fix that a little bit if you want to be accurate. Alright, now let's analyze this though a little bit, because what is it that really makes an ellipse here? What did we say before? Let's try to remember what we started out with. We said that an ellipse has a major axis and a minor axis, and it is symmetric along those. So here's our minor axis. If we consider from the center the nearest point, that's where our minor axis goes through. In this case, it aligns pretty well with the axis here. And okay, that was a bit off. Here we have a second axis. It's the major axis. And you see that because everything is symmetric and we constructed it from a square, we did everything properly basically. This is a good ellipse and it is accurate in perspective. So that's a good example. Now, the reason why mistakes happen is because we try to guess them. We just go ahead and draw something like this, and we want to draw a cylinder, so we go down and we draw another ellipse down there to close this shape. Now, it can be difficult to get this very accurate because you might go a bit too sharp on one side, a bit wider on the other side. And also one very common mistake is that the ellipse might be too flat, and that on the bottom we see the same angle as above. In reality, if we looked at this cylinder, so let's put it on the side as our bad example for a cylinder. Now, if we were to do this properly, we want to construct it from a cube ideally, or like a more stretched cube. So we need to draw a three-dimensional shape first, because that's eventually what we construct it from. So here's our three-dimensional shape. We'll draw something along the lines of this. Now we have to be careful that it's not that the sides are the same length. That's the only thing we really need to be careful with, and that can be, if we guess it, it's easy to make mistakes here. But guessing a cube is still easier than guessing the ellipses, so you might want to just take this step in between. You could also go ahead and construct the cube properly with perspective lines, but that's up to you at that point, how much time you want to spend on all that. So here's now our shape. I'll draw even the lines in the back that we cannot see. And now consider the top to be an ellipse and the bottom to be an ellipse that we connect in order to get the cylinder. Now, I will skip this step with the diagonals and just go ahead to mark the middle of all of these sides. should be somewhere around here, and then I will draw my ellipse through these points. Something along these lines should be good enough. And if we connect now these two ellipses, we get a nice cylinder that is hopefully as accurate as it can get in our perspective. Now, if we analyze it once again, you can again find that both of these ellipses, they have a major axis and a minor axis, maybe something like this, and even the one at the bottom here has a minor axis and a major axis. And if we compare them, what we should see, if I was doing a good job at drawing the ellipse, is that the bottom one is a bit wider than the one at the top. That is because when we look on a cube, the more we go, how can I explain it really? The closer it is to the horizon, the flatter it will be. If I take this away for a second and I draw you a more extreme example of what I mean, imagine here we have the horizon. Everything that's below the horizon we will look at from the top. Everything that's above the horizon we'll look at from the bottom. And this happens when we draw a cube. This will happen naturally just by connecting these lines. You know, if I was to draw a cube across the horizon, see how the bottom plane we look at from the top and the top plane we look at from the bottom, so we don't actually see what's on the top and what's on the bottom. If we were to now again connect the ellipses, I'll just very roughly approximate this now. We get two ellipses like somewhere in here and we connect them, and these lines are actually hidden, so we're looking, we can't see really what's on the top and what's on the bottom. So that's what I mean basically by, you know, you get a bit of a different level of, how can I say it, squishedness or distortion, depending on the perspective. And that's really what the challenging part is about guessing these ellipses correctly. So even when you guess them, it's good to know the construction so that you know what to look out for, where you'll probably make mistakes in your guesses and how to compensate for them in order to get very accurate results, even though you will end up at some point saving time by skipping many of these steps. So that's really all there is. I want to give you one final example by constructing a sphere. So let's move that to the side, and then we can end this video there. In the case of a sphere will always be a circle, first of all, even if we look at it in 3D. But what's important for us is to give a sphere a sense of direction. For example, if I want to show that the sphere is looking in this direction, I want to be able to give it these lines to indicate direction. But as you can see, adding these kind of lines that go around the sphere is quite difficult to do accurately. And in this example, even though with experience I guessed these lines, these are very far from accurate. Now let's take a look at how we can guess them more properly, or how we can construct them in a more accurate way. Usually we would start with a cube. I'll quickly show you the most correct construction first. This is what you would probably learn in art school or in other videos. So you start by making a cube. Actually, a cube is not really what you need. You need the section in the middle of the cube. We'll get there in a bit. So I make this cube here first. But what I really want is the middle sections. So we have three planes. Here is the first. The second one is in the middle of here. And this will get very messy because you add many lines on top of one another. And the third one goes around here. And I hope you can still keep track of where everything is that I'm drawing. I'll try to change colors next. Alright, But now we have 3 planes, and I'll try to erase a little bit what we don't need. So these are basically, these can be forgotten. Let's try to not look at these lines that are just on top. Even for me it gets difficult now to see which lines are the ones that we need and which ones aren't the ones. But something like this should give us a better view at what we're making. And I'll also get for all of these planes the center line now. Similarly, we could do it with diagonals, but that would just give us a huge mess, so I'll just draw these 3 axes. And now if we line out, let's start with this plane here, okay? Here is our first point, second point, third point, fourth point. So we take our blue color now and we do an ellipse that goes through these 4 points. Then I take the next color, the next plane. I once again mark myself those 4 points that I want to go through, and then I create the next ellipse. And this one is actually quite challenging because it's a very unusual angle at which I'm drawing this ellipse. So I really try to focus on just the points that I marked and the angle that I have to achieve basically at that point. So we get something like this, and then on the final plane that I haven't considered yet, I'll once again mark all my points that I need, and I'll draw the last ellipse that goes through those points now. And as you can see, it's getting really messy there, but it's construction and you can just try to make the lines that you don't need lighter. Now this though is just the lines that we see going around the curve. You can say these arcs here. In order to make the circle around it, we'll now contain all of these into one big circle and make sure that we get the outest point of all of these arcs into our circle. And due to inaccuracies, my sphere as a whole got a little bit squished together, it seems. But if we just take this whole thing, I make it a bit more transparent now. Let's see if I can do that. Let's copy it onto a different layer. Then I can reduce the opacity. We can now draw over it the important lines so that you can see that this actually makes sense. I will take a white color and go over the circle once. Well, sort of. And then to follow our blue lines, let's just get the blue color. The lines that we really need are the ones that are in the front, so I'll take this one. I'll take this one here. And we need one more over here. And so this gives us, let's see, a nice circle that, okay, I wasn't very accurate, I'll admit that, but the construction is correct. This gives us a sphere that has proper lines and the perspective should line up with what you have. But I want to show you one more way of getting there that is a bit with less steps, and you might get a bit less confused actually, because if there's too much lines, you end up making inaccuracies the other way around. So the way I like to do it is I just start with a circle, and what's important is to be able to control the direction as I did here, because I usually use circles and spheres for construction, as I said. So if it was a head, the most important thing is the direction. I'll mark myself the center and I'll draw a line into some direction that is the facing direction. So this could be where the head is facing. Let's just use this as an axis now, so I'll draw it through the whole circle, and next, from in between the center and this circle, I'll draw a point somewhere. This point defines how much the sphere is facing towards me or facing away. If I put my point here, basically this sphere will be looking in this direction. if I place it here in the front, well, it might be looking at me kind of like this. So I define this point according to what I'm searching for. Alright, next I just go ahead and I define my other two axes along this one. So I create now in all three directions these axes, and I know already that it has to go through here and on the back through this point. Now in perspective, parallel to this, or maybe a bit tilted towards the point at the back, I will add lines here and here. This is again points through which my ellipse has to go. I will draw for the other two lines, for the other two axes, the same kind of line. Make sure that they, if you want to add perspective, they go together towards like the rear, whatever is further away. And also for this last line that I haven't covered yet, I'll draw lines here and here. Now I'll mark the points through which your ellipse has to basically pass through. The first one that I want to make is going to go through here and here. And because this is like already on the circle, I know that this will be my major axis, so I can draw through here. And in order to get the distance on the minor axis, I'll kind of look at where these points are, and I'll guess how much I need to go to the back to kind of adjust for that according to the position of that point. So what I want to say basically, if this point is closer to the center, this arc will be more to the back. If this point is closer to the side, this arc will be closer over the center. So according to that, I adjusted and I just put it over it. The estimation in this sense is good enough. Then all I need to do is take the next kind of intersecting point of this line here and this line here. Again, this will be my major axis. My minor axis will be along this line here. And so I can draw my next line that goes through here and here to the back. This time I make sure that it also goes through to the front point here. And finally, the last axis that I haven't covered yet is here and here. So once again, through this point, through those 2 points, I'll try to find the ellipse. And so now, without much construction, without the whole cube that we constructed before, like this, we are able to construct the ellipses necessary to fill the circle, to make a sphere and to give it a sense of direction. And the only reason why we were able to kind of guess these ellipses correctly is because we knew how to deal with them. We know that they have to be centered, they have to be symmetrical, and so on and so forth. So please think about this, you know, let it go through your head, work with it a little bit, play around. If you have questions and you have some ideas of where it could be difficult or different, just go ahead and try it out. This is how you learn about ellipses. And there you will see there's a lot more to ellipses than you would think on first sight. So that's pretty much all I have to show. I thought, while I was practicing and learning about this topic recently, I thought it was actually surprisingly interesting, and I really wanted to share this knowledge with you. I hope at least it was inspiring for you. Maybe you'll start to do a little bit of this sort of geometric thing. I'm sure it will help you in construction of more complex drawings, or when you want to draw the same object from different angles. Anyways, just let me know in the comments if you have any questions. So until next time that I make a video, have a good time. Thank you so much for watching.